Let's get right into this and create a new C# script called the Build Manager. This script is going to take care of all of our building needs. It's going to reference some other scripts so that we know whether or not we can build in a certain area. So we'd call this something like a construction company or an engineer, something like that, because it's handling some other classes to aggregate information from those classes so that we can build from this one. Okay, the first thing that we're going to want here is a build key, and this is what we're using as we're going to left click, and that's going to check if we can build. Okay, so we're going to check if we're getting that input. If we are, we're going to go through our steps of checking whether or not we can build where the mouse has been clicked. The first thing that I want to do here is create a Boolean. This is actually going to be a property. It might look to you like a variable, but this is a property because what I'm going to do here is use this little lambda expression. This equals and greater sign operator is going to return whatever expression is on the right side of it. It is the same as saying get return. Okay, so this is just like a regular C# property, but it's a little bit easier to read and it looks a little bit nicer, at least to me. Notice that I defaulted that canBuild property to false. Okay, so just keep that in mind. Now we're going to bring in a reference to our Raycaster. We're making this a private reference because no other class needs to know about the Raycaster through the Build Manager. What we're going to do is when we're checking for input, we're going to check if we have the Raycaster, and we're going to check if we can build. And then we're going to go over here to our Raycaster, and if you remember, we have some code in here that actually builds for us. Okay, so we create this game object at the mouse position. So we're going to cut that from there, and we're going to paste it right here in the Build Manager. And what we need to do now is, you can see that we've got that little red squiggly line under hit. That's because we don't have hit through the Raycaster anymore. Now we have to get that property from the Raycaster. Now remember on the Raycaster that we have a get hit position property. That's where we're going to build. Okay, now let's go back to our Raycaster and go ahead and remove everything that we don't need from there. So all of this we aren't going to need. Really, we don't even need that print statement, but we're going to leave it anyway. Now I've made two errors here. I'm going to go into the editor and I'm going to try and build here, and it's not going to work. And you guys can tell me why. There's two reasons. The first one I told you about in the last section where we were looking at the Build Manager. I had defaulted this canBuild to false, so I'm going to set that to true. But there's another problem, and I want you guys to know or think about what it is. All right, this is a simple one, and it happens all the time in Unity. Okay, I completely forgot to bring in the Build Manager and put the Raycaster onto the Build Manager. So let's go ahead and right click. We're going to create an event system. So that's from the UI dropdown. We're going to create an event system because we're going to need that anyway. I'm going to put my Build Manager on the event system, and then I'm going to get a reference to the main, to the Raycaster from my main camera. This will already give us the ability to build because we can build anywhere by default, and we're just going to build wherever the Raycaster has gotten its last hit on a collider. Okay, that's why I'm able to build on trees. So as you might have noticed in the last video, I had done all of that. I had added the event system in play mode. So as you know, if you do things in play mode, usually they don't get saved. So what we have to do is create that stuff again. So I recreated the event system. I put the Build Manager on there, and I got a reference to the Raycaster in the Build Manager's Raycaster reference field. Now what we're doing here is we're going to adjust our camera so that we don't have to always move it around. Okay, so I'm just setting that initial position up. I'm saving the scene. And then we're going to go back into our Build Manager, and we are going to change the way that this canBuild property works. Okay, so we're going to add all of our information that we want to do the checks on. So we want to check that we actually have a Raycaster. Okay, so we want to check that it's not null, and we want to check that we're building on the correct layer. So you saw me building on those trees earlier in that first test. So what we're going to do is use that property that we had built in the Raycaster, the hit layer, and we're going to check if we're hitting a buildable layer. So I'm going to bring in a new private int, and I'm going to call this the build layer. So I'm going to default that to 6, I guess, is our ground layer. And if we're on the build layer, then we can build. So this is returning that the Raycaster is not null and that we are on the buildable layer. So in order to test this out, let's go back into the scene and look at our trees. Okay, they have these colliders on them, and those colliders are on a certain layer. And we want to make sure that those trees are not on layer 6, because layer 6 is where we can build. Right? See, I've reversed this, and I've said that we can only build on the layer on which those trees exist. So those trees exist on layer 7, and now the ground exists on layer 6, and we've just changed the build layer to 6. So we can build on the ground and no longer build on the trees. Hopefully that made sense. I know that didn't sound like the best explanation, but the idea is whatever layer is the build layer is the layer you can build on. Now in the next episode of How to Build in Unity, we're going to take a look at how to change from just building a standard cube to introducing some new items and things like that, and making sure that we have no collisions with world objects. That is, that we don't build while we're colliding with or overlapping world objects. See you next time.